Right, so I just want to focus on this part of this verse. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God. So this thing's been coming up with me quite a lot recently. This idea, the spirit of the world, worldliness, the spirit of the world. Now, when I was at my main church, my first church, the church that I was at till not that long ago, for I don't know 7 years or something like that. I obviously had I was like, I had I had a very powerful conversion, and I was almost traumatized in a way. That's not the right term to use, but I was extremely like, well, where do you go from here? You can't feel normal after that. I suppose what I'm saying. Now, to some extent, in relating to other people, I never really got close to very many people at all in my church. I mean, it was a church of about 320, say, at my church, but maybe only one or two people that I actually got very close to for any length of time. Everyone else, I just didn't really get to know. I'd only say a few passing things with them. But in the back of my mind, it was took me a long time to sort of get past the idea. I was thinking, well, I've met God, they've met God, so they must be right. They must be all about Jesus as well. But I wasn't getting those kind of signals back from them. Now, I have had difficulty communicating with people anyway because I was, diagnosed with Asperger's when I was in my 40s or something like that, before I was a Christian. And I knew that I had some disconnect when it came to communicating with people, understanding what it was they were actually about, or why I was seemed to be putting them off. So when I came to church, I wasn't. It was more confusing for me because I was thinking, I didn't. I just assumed, well, they're Christians, so I must be okay with them because Christianity makes you like love people and stuff like that. That's the way I sort of thought about it. But the thing that I found was that when someone did start speaking to me, maybe I was doing the door, on the doors that day, so I'd be with someone else. I'd end up chatting to them. Um, they didn't seem to be terribly leaning towards anything spiritual. It was more like they wanted to speak about something like their interest in skiing, or what job do you do, and things like that. And I didn't really put it together. I just thought, oh, they must be a bit of a weak Christian. I just thought that was just like, not a very strong Christian. And I just thought that was just a sort of, I thought they were the exception, if you know what I mean. But anyway, the gist of it is that by the time I left that church, it was become clear to me that a lot of people didn't like me. I didn't realize that, and it's not very Christian, but they didn't like me, and they didn't trust me, and I'm not, this isn't just paranoia. I'm pretty certain because I know of people that were told by other people to avoid me and things like that. So there was a definite kind of something going on there, in the kind of Christian I was and the kind of Christian they were. I mean, I knew that I was pretty strong, radical, whatever the word is. Um, I thought the issue was that they didn't think I was for real, as in I'm not a real. This is not a real thing, or that. But I wasn't. It wasn't like I was talking to people very much. I wasn't hard. I mean, I didn't really speak to hardly anybody for any length of time in that church at all. Even in all those years, I never got friends. I never done anything sociably. I wasn't part of anything, and um, so it's hard to know where they were getting their information. But anyway, the point is that then COVID happened, and wasn't really at church for a long time, and now I've been sort of frequenting a couple of different places. Not quite sure where I'm gonna start going to. I do think that whatever the church is like, I've got to go to church. I've got to at least be in the same space as believers, at least that one time a week. So I'm doing that. Well, I went to this church that I've been going to, and there's somebody I know from my last church, and he was a nice guy anyway. He was a nice person. I knew he was nice. So he was likable, and he's someone that I would consider quite. He's probably grown up as a Christian. He's serving in that church. I mean, he's older than me. He's what I'd think of as being a serious Christian. I don't know that much about him, but as years have gone on, because I'm working in the building trade, so I'm in construction, and I'm working with, but I've come out of arts and music, so you can imagine how much of a challenge that is, to get used to the difference in the kind of people you work with. But over the time, I've become more skilled at talking to people, that I couldn't really communicate very well with in the past. And so anyway, I'm in this church. This is the point, and this guy, I haven't seen him for a while, and he's asked me how my son's doing. My son that's a Christian, and he said, I said, oh, his mum's taking him to see the Rolling Stones. And which is neither here nor there, but anyway, the point is that she's taken him to see the Rolling Stones. She's not a believer, so, and he's gone to me, oh, haven't you gone? He said, I would have thought that would have been your thing, your kind of thing, because he knows I was a musician. And I just kind of I said, well, I actually had a job I had to do anyway. I've got this job I've really got to finish, and I couldn't finish it, so I couldn't do anything anyway. But the point is, I wasn't going to go anyway. But then he started speaking about he'd seen this, the Glastonbury concert of Paul McCartney last night, and he was talking about that, and I was just making small talk, with this guy, which I don't normally do, because it's not something that I've got any kind of feel for. But anyway, he was talking about it, and when I came away, I had to go back and do this job that I had to get finished. I'm in this job, and I'm on my own, and I'm thinking, that guy was very comfortable talking to me, and it's because I was talking about worldly things. And I suddenly sort of thought back to being at my church and thought, if I hadn't been so radical because of the revelations that I'd had and stuff like that, and the way that I was saved, and I'd been more inclined just to chat about football and how moving house or whatever world things, I would have been I wouldn't have been disliked. I would have been included in things. And it just suddenly hit me. I realised as well that, although I didn't know this, I sort of put it together that there must be a sort of unspoken thing in a lot of these churches that we don't want to be like those Christians that give us a bad name. We want to be more like the world so that we can attract people. We want to appear normal or something like that. But what happens is that it becomes awkward to talk about spiritual things to people. There's a slight barrier. So for someone like me that wants to get into what's God doing, I'm always want to know what God's doing, and they don't want. They're not. It's like suddenly I realised that this is a very comfortable conversation. I didn't have anything against that guy. Don't believe me, but also I was surprised that I thought, well, here's a guy I've not really spoken to him at length, but I'm thinking he clearly watches this worldly music, listens to it, doesn't have any issue with that, doesn't think there's anything wrong or anything about that as a believer. And I was thinking, you know, that's quite, that's pretty a long, long way from where I'm at. I mean, for me, it's like, to me, I mean, and it's the Holy Spirit's leading, I'm sure. There's been a very drastic, you know, breaking off of everything I can possibly find that's of the world, out of me, out of my, you know, out of my life, you know. Which brings me to the, you know, brings me to this next scripture. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. Little children, it is the last time, as ye have heard, that Antichrist shall come. Even now there are many antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us. Well, you know, going out from they went out of us doesn't necessarily mean leaving the church. It just means departing from the faith, or what the true faith is. And he says, you know, how are these people going? Well, he's talking about loving the world. That's why people go out. That's what he's using here. It's the world. Now, yeah, it talks about the spirit of the world, and I'm very aware of this, or I've become more aware of this, because if there's anything that's coming between some people I know being saved, it's the spirit of the world. They just love the world. They love all that. You know, so when I think of someone that's unsaved that I know, yeah, going to see sort of some rock concert, getting excited about it all, getting it, you know, having had a really nice meal in a restaurant. I'm not talking about things that are like, you know, considered evil, but they're the world, and it's the spirit of the world that's driving them all. And just what struck me that I didn't understand before is the reason that these people didn't like me was because they had the spirit of the world. They don't even realize it. Because he says, you've got the spirit of God, and, you know, the spirit of the world, it's like not got this. I mean, you know, if you've got the spirit of the world, you know, obviously that's compromising the Holy Spirit, isn't it, in your life? And I just realised that it just made, it's almost like I sort of replayed the past and the way situations had been in, things I'd had. I mean, you know, I once like was started like praying with somebody, and they'd sort of said to their pastor that they were praying with me, and the pastor said, "Oh, watch Gordon, he's very intense," whatever that's meant to mean. Do you know what I mean? And I'm kind of thinking, what am I doing wrong here? I don't understand. It's like I couldn't, you know, my problem was that I couldn't find anywhere maybe one or two people, you know, people that shared the kind of passion that I had. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a good Christian by any means. I don't consider myself a strong Christian or anything. And you know, I'd struggle like all people struggle. But the point is, you know, I'm not really interested in much else apart from, like, now that I know there's a God and that he's real and that he's involved in our lives and that there's a heaven, there's a hell, and there's a judgment. That to me is all I'm interested in, because it's the only thing that has any relevance. There's no relevance in anything else. And this is the thing, these people have the spirit of the world and they still think it's relevant. And you know, when it talks about people being lukewarm, you know, I talk a lot about lukewarmness. Well, that's because God's put that on me. I think partially, I'm starting to think, I think this is, because I keep looking at them, I think, well, it's not like I'm thinking, and I mean, I know you get different, the kind of churches I go, this is, this is like, this is a part of the world where, yeah, I'm not saying there's no sin, but the sin isn't overt in the way, I'm talking about Christians, culturally, they're quite, where I am, it's quite reserved. I don't know if you know what I mean by when I say reserved. I mean, people don't really, they might be doing some stuff, but generally speaking, there's a lot of self-control. There's a lot of people that are pretty, I mean, it's pretty easy for them to get saved and to be, because I come from Scotland, and in Scotland, there's people that they're wild, you know what I mean? Well, they're not wild around here. They're very civilized. And I used to wonder, like, God seemed to be talking about, these people are not in good shape, and these churches are not in good shape. And I think, yeah, but it's not like there's a lot of overt sin or something, that. What's the issue here? And I knew it was lukewarmness, but I'm thinking, but what are we talking about here? What is it I'm looking at? These people are probably more devout than I am, and in terms of their, their walk. But it's the worldliness. It's like they've not left the world. They still love the world. And the thing is, they've been taught that way. They've been encouraged by the church. They're encouraged to, when you go into the church, they're going in. This has come as a revelation to me, I have to say. They're going in and they're saying, how you doing? How's your week been? Oh, I've got a job, I'm not finished yet, and I'm trying. They want to have these conversations. That's what they're into. And then they want to lift their hands and worship and stuff like that, listen to the sermon. With me, it was always, because the Holy Spirit was moving in that church when I first went there, I just wanted to meet with God. I mean, Sunday, it's the one day that I'm thinking, I hope I meet with God. I hope God does something. It was all I was thinking about. It's all that matters. I want to meet with God. It's not like people that have this idea, oh, that's a bit extreme or something. Do you honestly think once you've met the living God, you're going to go, okay, but don't, I only want that, I don't want to be doing that. Need to be normal sometimes. I mean, there is no normal after meeting God. There is no normal after meeting Jesus. There is no normal. If I'm struggling, I'm struggling because I'm pained over my relationship with God. I'm pained that I might be, offending Him, or I'm not. Everything's about God. Everything to me is geared towards God. When I see a church, I think, why aren't there people in it? I mean, any day of the week, praying. Why aren't the believers in there praying? Why aren't they gathering together and praying for their unsaved loved ones or whatever? Why aren't they praying for stuff? Why aren't they praying for the church? Why aren't they getting together just because it's, seeking God's face? Why aren't they using that building more than 2 or 3 times a week? Well, it's because of the spirit of the world. Because they want to be having a barbecue with their friends. They want to be, they want to be watching movies and doing other stuff. They've got better things to do than be with God. It's bad news. It's bad news, And I look at these people and I think God's telling me they're not going to make it. They're not going to make it. And they don't... and I feel for them because they've been deceived. They don't understand. They just don't understand what they're doing wrong. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. And the powers that be won't let a voice come out of there that suggests there is something wrong with what they're doing. It's a narrow way. It's very narrow. It's like extremely narrow. It's the narrowest way there is. When it talked about how there was only 8 saved with the flood. Yeah, there was only 8. It's making a point, about there's no real reason to expect that there's going to be many people saved at all. There's no real reason to expect that. Yeah, he's died on the cross. Yeah, he's made salvation available to everybody. It's free. It's not of works. It's of grace. It's through faith. It's not by putting, it can't be achieved through the law or anything that we do. It's through what He's done. Yeah, all of that. But you got to stay in it. You got to be in it. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, have we not done this and I've done that? And I will say, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you, So, how can you do God's will if you're not doing God's will? You know what I mean? Shopping, buying things, that's what you want to do. That's not God's will. God's will isn't about buying things. God's will is not about watching, all the new movies. God's will is not. I'm not talking about the worst. I'm not talking about the bad, the thing, the big sins, the Christian sins, pornography, alcoholism, all these different things. Yeah, they're going to take you to hell as well. But the point is that I'm talking about worldliness. Being in the world, not having come out of the world. You don't make yourself appealing to unbelievers by trying to believe like the world and be a believer. You just look pathetic, to be honest. When I became a Christian, and people I worked beside realised I was a Christian, and it was a mean, manly world that I was in. A very, very kind of, these guys were just mean. Well, I'd get occasional times when it was like the spirit the spirit of the world would rise up in them, and they'd start going at me. And I'd have bouts of it. I knew that something was going on. It was like time of persecution, and I'd just get through it. It wouldn't last long. It'd only be 5 minutes, but it wouldn't be very nice. But, I've just been what I am. I just stick with it. I've witnessed to a lot of them over time, and, I have a kind of respect from these people. In fact, I'm more popular now with unbelievers than I ever was when I was a believer. When I wasn't. I think because I am what I am. I say I am what I say. I just. The at some point they go. We know who Gordon is. We know what he is, and he's genuine, and it's like. I'm not trying to be like them, or trying to kind of be cool anymore or something like that. So anyway, yeah, come out of the world. Bless you.